All right, so I have loaded 3 different filaments into the AMS light system of my A1 Mini. I'm sorry, A1. And now I have to tell, using Bambu Studio, I have to tell where to print which colors. So I've opened up my model here. I have this basic little bowl thing with a lid, and I'm going to map the colors. So first I'm going to select one of my objects. I'm going to start with this guy. And then up in the top menu here, I'm going to go to where it says color painting. And I'm going to paint here where I want the colors to be. So notice that in the top right hand corner here, I have filaments. I only have one filament and it's green. So everything is going to print one filament, whichever color I choose. The problem is I want 3 different filaments. So I'm going to click plus, plus, and now I have 2. It says green, yellow, red. That's not actually the color. It's just a way to map which colors are going to go where. And then later I'm going to say which color is which. So I'm going to start with this yellow one. And I have these different tools. You can mess around with it, kind of see what they do. But basically you can paint a circle, which I believe is just the top layer. A sphere, I believe, kind of extends down in like 3 dimensions. I'm not sure what this triangle does. The height range, I'll show you that in a minute, but basically you can select everything in a certain height to be a certain color. You can fill an entire thing, and then I'm not sure what the gap fill is. So going back to the height range, what we have to remember about 3D printing is that the printer just puts down layer by layer by layer of filament. Going along with that, you have to think about the support, overhangs, and then yeah, all of those things that we've already talked about. So at this point, what you have to remember is that if you, let's say, make a line like this, that's going to print, it's going to print an entire layer of, let's say, this green filament. And then it's going to have to stop, it's going to have to change filament, and then it's going to have to do one little bit of yellow, and then it's going to have to change filaments again, and then it's going to have to do green again, another layer until it gets back to this point, and then it's going to have to transition to yellow, go back to green, and there's a huge waste of filament going along with this, and it takes a lot of time. But if you want to do multiple colors, it can be neat, especially if you kind of plan ahead about what colors you want to be where and how to make it happen more efficiently. All right, so let's go ahead and color a few different things here. Let's say that we want this hole in here to be yellow. I can zoom in, kind of rotate so that way I can get my marker in there, and then I can make it yellow. Might be easier if I go to fill, and then I can fill that whole surface, and that's going to be easier. Notice this one, this circle doesn't go through this hole, and so when I clicked on that, it made everything attached to that yellow rather than just the little hole that I wanted to. And so I might have to do something different there. But if you have basically one surface, you can do the fill, and it makes everything of that surface that color. So you can see that this might take a long time. One cool thing that you should know about is, well, first of all, the section view. Let's say that I want to do like inside this, but underneath I want that to be a certain color. I can go to the bottom. The problem is I have the bottom in the way, but if I click section view, I can remove the bottom. It's not actually removing it, it's just hiding it. So then I can get inside, and then I can do what I want to. And then I can bring that back out, and then I can see the bottom again. All right, so a couple other tools that you should know about is this vertical. It's going to make it so whatever changes you make, it only does it in a vertical direction. So I'm holding down the mouse, and you can see that it's painting it vertically, but if I go sideways, it doesn't do anything. It only paints it vertically. So that can make what you're doing a little bit more precise. You can do the same thing horizontally. And then the last thing you should know about is if I select this, and let's say that I want this knob to be a certain color. So there are different ways that I can do that. Again, I can just paint it on. I could probably maybe do the fill option. I can also do this height range where everything within a certain height is going to be that color. And so I've selected these heights. Now if I had another thing protruding up over here, everything at that height layer is going to, with this object, is going to be yellow. And I could bring it all the way up like that. And that goes through the object. It's not just on the surface, it goes through the object. But if I come back over here and I have this other like bowl part of it, that part's not going to be yellow. It's just going to be that part. And please remember that as I am printing this, it's going to do all layers at, let's say, a certain height range at one time. So the layer for this bowl, I'm sorry, the lid, the knob, the same layer for the bowl is going to be printed at the same time. So if you're printing part of it in the green filament, part of it in the yellow filament, it's going to have to switch midway through that layer and then switch again, and it takes a long time. Now, one more thing before I show you how to print it. Notice this little tower thing here. It has yellow and it has green. That's a purge tower. And if I click here where it says others, and I look over on the left-hand side, I'm sorry, not a purge tower, it's a prime tower. And what that does is it makes it so kind of between layers, between colors, it's going to purge a bunch of filament. And it does that to make sure that you don't get residue of yellow where it should be green. The problem is that it wastes a huge amount of filament to make that tower. You can make it smaller, and you might have a little bit of bleed where you have yellow carrying over into a green section, but it's also going to make it smaller, and you're not going to waste quite so much filament. You could totally disable that. However, again, you might get colors where you don't want them. All right, so I've added a couple of colors. I have this green filament, whatever we choose that to be. I have the yellow one. I could also add a third one. And once I'm done and I'm satisfied with my colors, I'm going to slice it. Make sure that you think about supports and infill and everything else that you should be considering with the printing. It's going to slice it. And after it slices, I need to send it to the printer. So I'm going to click on print plate, and you can see here that I've chosen my A1, and there are a few different options that come up. So if you're printing from the rear spool, you always disable the AMS. However, in this case, we need to enable the AMS, and then we have to map which colors are going to go where. And so in our slot 1, we have the white PLA, and then in slot 2, we had the red PLA, and then in slot 4, we have the black PLA. We have nothing in slot 3. So when I painted on my colors, I had green, yellow, and red, which remember has nothing to do with the actual colors in the slots. It just tells us which slots are going to be used. So for the yellow for the green on my model, I want that to be white. This is going to be primarily a white little base thing. And so I'm going to choose slot 1 for that. And then maybe for the yellow, I didn't want black, but I wanted red. And so I'm going to choose the second slot, which had the red filament in it. And then for the third color, I want black. So on my model, it was red, but I actually want the black PLA. So I'm going to choose slot 4, which has a black PLA in it. Now I have chosen where I want my colors, and I have chosen, the slots where I want my colors, and then for each slot I've said which filaments are going to be there. So if you look at the little knob of this thing, it's going to be red, which is slot 2. So on my model I painted it yellow, but if I look up here I can see that that's going to be red up here. What I painted yellow is now going to be red, et cetera, et cetera. So I like to turn off flow dynamics calibration. You can do that. It takes a lot of filament, takes more time just getting it set up. So I usually turn that off, but you can leave that on. And then once we're done, we'll say send, and it should print it, multiple colors, and it's going to take a lot longer. You can see that this model right here is 13 hours. And if I did this without multiple colors, it's going to be less. I want to say around 7 hours or so. So it does take a lot more time, uses a lot more filament. but it can be really cool to get multiple colored prints.